In what is typically a major matchup in the Big Ten and certainly circled before the season as a key to winning the Big Ten Eastern Division, not so much. So Penn State gets off the schneid in winning for the first time in 2020 in 6 games, beating Michigan in Ann Arbor 27-17. We got Tim Maiden on the line from Black Shoe Diaries of SB Nation. Of course, like, comment, share the videos on social media, subscribe right here to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Hit that bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live. Tim, got the monkey off the back today.
Just like how they drew it up, Mark. Looked like hot garbage for the first 5 weeks of the season, and then go in and get your first win in Ann Arbor in over a decade. So, but yeah, it was, I think, maybe from the get-go, there may have been signs that this was not going to be quite like the last 5 weeks. Starting from the opening drive for Penn State, they marched down 10-play, 75-yard drive, finish in the end zone. I know Michigan answered later on, but Penn State actually never trailed in this ball game, believe it or not. It was tied early on, but they added on 10 more points to take a 17-7 halftime lead, which was also quite shocking, as that was the first time all year that they scored double-digit points in the first half and held a lead going into halftime. So it was very unusual from the previous 5 games. And then my thoughts turned to from, okay, are we going to come back and make it instead of going, are we going to come back and make it a game and just come up short again, to, okay, can we actually hang on to a lead now, and not blow it? Like Penn State under Franklin has kind of had a history of doing, the double-digit fourth quarter leads being blown in prior years. But thankfully that was not the case. Michigan did keep it close throughout. They cut the lead down as close to as 3 points in the fourth quarter. But Penn State, to their credit, they put together another huge 12-play drive to finish in the end zone and make the score 27-17. And it ended up staying that way. Some quick thoughts on my end. I think the biggest noticeable difference between this and the prior 5 games was 0 turnovers on Penn State's part. Neither Sean Clifford nor Will Levis threw a pick, especially didn't throw a pick 6. There were no fumbles lost. Keyvon Lee, he definitely needs to be the starter going forward. 22 carries, 134 yards, and a touchdown. And and Cliff did a solid job with running the ball. He had that nice touchdown scamper right after he had gone out the previous series with a knee injury. And what reminded me of Trace McSorley a couple years ago against Iowa, getting injured in the first half and then coming back in the second half and ripping off a huge touchdown run. So there were some shades of Trace there in that sense. But most importantly, he took care of the ball. They did not turn it over like they had, a bad case of doing in the previous 5 games. And, that and the defense, they played the hands down probably the best game of the season. They still, don't get me wrong, there's still some issues. They still have problems stopping the run. Hassan Haskins went over 100 yards and had a couple touchdowns. And, Michigan was kind of able to attack the center of the field pretty well. But to their credit, they got stops when they absolutely had to. I think most notably, like 5.5 minutes left, Penn State's hanging on that 10-point lead, and it's like 4th and 1, maybe less than that, across midfield. And Penn State just gets a huge stop. And one of my Black Shoe Diaries colleagues in our Slack channel mentioned it was shades of the 2004 game against Indiana, which I don't know if you're familiar with, if you've seen the highlights, but Penn State was similar to this year. They were struggling. They were like in the midst of a losing season, and Indiana got a first down pass all the way to the 1-yard line. First and goal from the 1. There's like a couple minutes left. All they need to do is just punch it in. They're probably going to win the game. But Penn State holds them, stops them on all 4 downs and takes over. And that sort of turned around momentum. It was towards the end of the season, but they went on to wax Michigan State in their season finale. And then the following year, they went on to have that special 2005 Big Ten championship season. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's what's going to happen here, but you look at what's ahead in the schedule. You got Rutgers next week. By all means, it's not a no cakewalk. I'm seeing how they took Michigan to 2 overtimes the previous week. I'm sure even today, even after this game, they're still smelling blood in the water against Penn State, a team they would absolutely love to beat, I'm sure. That's not going to be an easy game by any means, but it's certainly a winnable one. And they got Michigan State the following week. And they haven't looked, aside from beating Michigan, they haven't looked so hot themselves. So got 2 very winnable games. You got some positive momentum now from getting your first win of the year. So we'll see if they can finish strong here down the stretch. And then don't forget, they do have a crossover game against a Big Ten opponent from the West Division. We don't know. I initially suspected it would be Nebraska or Illinois, but now depending on how they do these next couple of weeks, it could be somebody else, but maybe Minnesota. But they can win that. They'll be 4-5. And given how it seems like the bowl games this year, they're kind of eschewing the whole you need to have 6 wins to be eligible thing. So they could, I'm sure they would be an attractive pick for any bowl site, even if they were 4-5. And if they were to win that game, actually, they would finish the season at 500, which, just going into today sounded pretty unfathomable. So believe it or not, for right now, at least, that streak of not having a losing season in 16 years is still intact.
So one of the misgivings and undoings of the season that caused it to unravel, of course, was losing Journey Brown before the season started, then losing Noah Cain on the first drive of the season. So Keyvon Lee, as you mentioned, he immediately was one of the main guys against Indiana, 22 for 134, as you mentioned, against Michigan. So is he a number 1 back? Like a number 1 should be at Penn State, number 1 back?
Absolutely. Journey had that. He was the guy on the team who had that combination of power and speed. And I know I've mentioned this countless times on your shows in the past, but his performance in the Cotton Bowl was a display of that power and speed combination. So, I mean, it was definitely a blow to lose him for the season. I mean, there's no doubt that that Kirk Shiraka, the new offensive coordinator, was going to rely heavily on him to establish the ground game, him and Noah Cain. And it seems today, though, finally, they seem to have found a back that they can rely on to, get you those 3 or 4 yards on first down, or, get you a second and manageable or third and manageable, or can pick up those tough yards on 3rd and short, get the first down. And sometimes he can break off a big game too. So, he brings, he's definitely not a speedy guy, but he definitely brings that power running game to him. And, it worked today. And, he's kind of become like that Noah Cain type back, so let's just hope, he's not as injury prone as Noah, unfortunately, has shown.
And we could be seeing the future with Parker Washington with a nice day as a freshman.
Absolutely. He was tremendous today. He had 9 catches, 93 yards, didn't get in the end zone, but I mean, he made some real clutch catches to keep drives alive. In a game where Jahan Dotson was rather quiet, I'm sure it's because Michigan was, laser focused on, shutting him down. But that allowed for Parker Washington to once again show why he was, a recruit that fans were pretty excited about. And so, future looks bright receiver with him leading the way. And, so it'll, I'd like to see maybe Keandre Lambert-Smith also step up a bit too, the other freshman receiver. But there's still at least a few more weeks for that to happen. But Parker Washington certainly very promising for the future.
This was the game of the embattled coaches, Harbaugh and Franklin. Based on the traffic that you see at Black Shoe Diaries and your activity on Twitter and all the message boards and so forth, how heavy is the heat from the fan base, and how heavy do you think the actual heat is from where it would matter the administration on James Franklin?
So yeah, if you spoke to the message boards or the commenters on Black Shoe Diaries or on Twitter, you'll get a mix. You'll get people that wanted to fire James Franklin a few weeks ago, especially after the loss to Maryland. And then there's others that, while they're certainly disappointed in Franklin and maybe losing confidence in him. They certainly aren't ready to, fire him just yet. And a lot of folks will cite his $30 million buyout as a reason why, and I agree with that. We're talking about the administration standpoint. He's not getting fired. He's in no danger of getting fired because of that, in part because of that huge buyout. And also, Franklin, I'm sure even the athletic department can probably spin this as a crazy COVID year. I don't fully buy it as an excuse, but I do see where it affects, like when you're bringing in 4 new coaches, new offensive coordinator, new O-line coach, and they only had a couple months before COVID hit and shut everything down to try to implement their system. So they didn't get a spring practice to do anything, and they didn't have a traditional, August 2-a-days to implement anything. And of course you had the season, the revised season schedule come out, and then 4 days later gets canceled, and then they bring it back. And my understanding is, I guess Franklin let the players go home during that period between the season being canceled and then being back on, and that may have had an effect. And also, it's not like they didn't start practicing all together as a squad. They were just doing it by position groups up until like a couple of weeks ago. And that to me was kind of mind-boggling. Like that, it's normally, they're all practicing together, starting with the August 2-a-days. But you have to imagine, I'm sure it probably threw off cohesion and team chemistry and everything. So, if you're gonna, the point I'm trying to make is it can easily be spinned as a fluke year by Franklin or the AD. So that's why he's not going to get fired. I can only see Franklin just deciding to walk on his own. Like if, the fact he's been away from his family for so long is tearing on him, and he just doesn't, his heart's just not into coaching right now, then I can maybe see him walking away for those reasons. But again, it's only going to be on his own volition that he's gone after this season. More likely he's back next year. Hopefully there's some changes made. I think there are probably certain coaching staff members that probably need to be gone, but I won't get into that here. But and also they do need to hit the transfer portal to get some guys at key positions, like quarterback, or probably on the defensive side of the ball too. But it's probably discussion for another time. But the point I'm trying to make is James Franklin is very likely to be back in 2021, no matter what some people may say on Twitter or Facebook or the message boards or on the Black Shoe Diaries comments.
I don't think it's difficult to argue that once they lost that freakish game to Indiana, then the season rode on the Ohio State game, where the conventional thought was they would beat Indiana. Even if they lost to Ohio State, they were probably the second best team in the Big Ten and would only lose 1 or 2 games, have a Prime Bowl appearance, or be maybe that selection of a college football playoff team out of the Big Ten as a second team. But once they lost to Indiana, then the season rode on Ohio State. They lose to that game. I don't think there's any question, if you look at their performance against Indiana and Ohio State, that those 2 losses took the steam out of the rest of the season. Now, that's not an excuse, but I think it's visible. And then also you lose your best defensive player, who might be the best in the conference. You lose arguably your best offensive player, and his backup, who's a top 5 running back out of high school. And again, not an excuse because it's an unacceptable season, but you're talking about a coach who has taken his team to 3 top 10 finishes in the last 4 years. The other was a top 15 finish. New Year's 6 bowl games, a Big Ten championship, Rose Bowl, Cotton Bowl, Fiesta Bowl. I don't think he gets fired or should get fired after one bad season. My thought. All right, Tim Aiden, Black Shoe Diaries, SB Nation. Please join him and the rest of the staff there as Penn State tries to right the season and build off this win in Ann Arbor for the first time since, you said, 2010, huh?
2009, actually.
2009. Okay. All right, Tim, we appreciate you stopping by.
All right. Thanks, Mark.